lead by example in terms of, I'll give you probably the most clear one that I see sometimes in coaching, or one of the more clear ones, is that I want Aaron to be cool, calm, and collected, poised. I always talk about him being poised. Hey, you need to be poised out there when you're on the diamond. Yet when an umpire makes a mistake, am I poised as a coach? When I talked to Aaron about next play, you got to move on. Because I heard this guy, Jamy, on this podcast, this great podcast, talking about, moving on. You got to move on. But then when Aaron commits a mistake as a coach, do I move on if it really cost us the game? And a lot of times we don't lead by example. We don't do the things that we're saying.
Hello, my friend, and welcome to Something for Everybody. My name is Aaron Machbitz. Jamy, welcome to the show.
Aaron, appreciate you having me, man. You're doing some good stuff. I appreciate you being on the show.
Absolutely. My very first and most important question is, how are you doing? Like, actually, for real, how are you
doing? The last week I've been sick physically, so that has not been fun. And so physically I've been a little run down. So that's been this is actually my first day of having a full day of calls and doing stuff. So getting right back up on the horse after getting bucked off after getting knocked off for a few days. So, but as most people know, when you're kind of sick, it affects you mentally as well. And it's just like, it's and I'm probably a big baby too. My wife's a lot better at handling sickness. Wives, they give birth and they handle everything without having to show any chinks in their armor. Guys, we get a cold or something and it's like, it's the worst thing ever. And we have to be down for like 3 days.
Yeah. Yeah. Gotta shut it down.
I shouldn't say guys do that, but I do that. I'm a baby, I guess, when it comes to that.
Yeah. Like whenever I'm physically ill and I can't like go to the gym or do my normal routine, it just makes me irritable. So not only am I sick and things are probably coming out my mouth and out my butt, I also am in a crappy mood. So it's like not a good combination.
Yeah. Figuratively and literally. But yeah,
yes.
The going to the gym thing, I'm always telling my wife, well, when you get sick, you just gotta, you gotta punch it in the face. You gotta go right back at it and you gotta get in the gym. Don't let that sickness keep you down. And then when I get sick, I'm like, oh, I need to rest a little bit. So it's, as a coach, as a leader, it's always easier to tell other people how to do things. And now that's why I'm now a consultant. It's a lot easier just to tell people what they should do, but I don't actually have to do it myself.
Yeah, you found the perfect career path. Yeah, I feel that as well when I'm coaching my kids and stuff. But speaking of like rest and recovery, I wasn't going to go in this direction to start, but since we're here, let's talk about it. For a long time, at least when I was playing or coming up, there was always a mentality of grind, hustle, hard work, all of that. And of course, there's a place for that. Of course, you have to have those sort of prerequisites of working hard and effort and diligence and, practice and all of those things. But now I think the conversation is pointed in the right direction about rest and recovery and how important that is for someone becoming elite, whether that be in sport or business. Have you seen that as well, or have you integrated that in your work? And what are you thinking about that?
Yeah, it's definitely something that's changed the mindset. The mindset has changed more towards maybe not even the specifics of, I don't know what the technical phrases would be, but, the work smarter, not harder. And you see it, whether it's online businesses or sports or whatever it is, whatever industry you're in, a lot of times it's like, oh, I'm just grinding, rise and grind, which there is some legitimacy to that. I mean, you have to work hard, but I think it's moving a lot more towards the working smarter as opposed to harder issue. And I think you're seeing that, especially with all the mental health. And I know you do a lot with mental health and you have experts on a lot smarter than me about mental health. But as we get more into that, where people are more aware of that and people understand that this really is a big deal and it affects so many people, that the work smart, not hard thing, I think is going to catch on in a lot more areas too. And not that you'll ever be putting up on a pedestal people that don't work hard at all. Like you've still got to do the work. You still got to put in, you still have to be industrious. You still have to roll up your sleeves once in a while. but you can be efficient. And sometimes that will help you be more effective down the road. And so I think we're starting to see that. I know with me, I'll catch myself because I've always been to work hard. It doesn't matter how many hours. I'm going to put in all the hours, and I'm terrible because I'll do work late at night and then I'll still get up early in the morning. So I don't get much sleep, and I definitely don't eat well. So I'm not the best example of health sometimes, but I have started, even with my own business that I run here these last few years, understanding that the same reason I'm working hard sometimes is by saying, well, if I don't do it, no one else will do it. Okay. And I think that's a legitimate thing we tell ourselves. Well, I have to do it because no one else will. But the same thing applies to our health. Well, if I'm doing it all the time and go, 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 and then I wear myself out and can't do it, well, then no one else is doing it. So the same mentality can apply if you just flip it. If I don't take care of myself, well, no one else will do the business when I'm sick for 3 days or 4 days and nothing's getting done. So sometimes we don't look at it from the other lens or the other paradigm. And I think we're starting to see that a little bit more. People are starting to look at, hey, I've got to stay healthy mentally and physically, or else nothing will get done.
Yes, absolutely. And I think you can look at them together also, right? If you're someone who wants to get up every day and freaking crush it and like get to the edge of your capacity and find out what you're capable of every single day, you're only really going to be able to do that if you have enough energy. And how do you have enough energy? Well, you take care of your sleep. And so I think now we're thinking about it in the combination in sort of the harmonious way, rather than you can only put into this bucket and has to be taken away from this bucket, but putting them together. Like if you sleep more than 4 hours, you don't have enough time in the day, and you're going to get, lapped by this person and they're working harder than you. And like, well, yeah, but they're working at 70% and I'm doing quality work at 100% because I figured out my rest and recovery, but I'm still putting in the necessary reps to get where I want to get. So I think, at least how I talk to my athletes, is like trying to put it together. But for young kids, man, like sleep is like not on their high bucket list because they want to do stuff. They want to stay late at night. They're Snapchatting. They're, hanging out with their friends. They're watching something on TV so they can have a sense of belonging or talk to their friends about it tomorrow. So just introducing that idea, I think, very slowly to them, and then having it catch up to them when they do need that sleep. So now they have this, oh, my coach told me this like a while ago. Here's what I'm going to implement it. Some of those things have a later effect, but I think still talking about it is important for them to understand.
Well, and if you're talking about high level athletes as well, or people that have a lot of talent, they can get away with some of that stuff, with those bad habits, because, all right, let's say I didn't get much sleep last night and I come to practice today. Well, I don't get punished for that because I'm going against the JV kids, or I'm going against, I'm competing every day in practice against people who aren't as good as me. And so I can almost walk through those practices. I can go through the motions. And then when we have competitions, a lot of the times, there's a lot of teams or competitors we're going against that are not as good as us. And so I might not have these good habits, but I can still get away with it. It's just when we have those big matches or those big games, that it all of a sudden, it comes back to haunt us. And then we're trying to figure out, well, why is it, and it's probably someone else's fault or it's coach's fault. Well, maybe it was those habits you had. You just never saw them catch up to you until it was go time, until it was a real, because let's face it, a lot of training sessions and practice sessions for high level athletes are pretty easy. Like they don't push themselves. They don't have anyone to push themselves either. And a lot of times, unfortunately, coaches don't push them because coaches want to keep them happy.
Right. Yeah. I mean, you shared something just the other day on Twitter about a clip from Michael Jordan, right? Like how hard he practices so that nothing surprises him in the game. And maybe his teammates were, were a little hesitant about that, but like it obviously produced the right results. So then in the big time moments, he wasn't nervous about things. He knew that he had rehearsed as intensely as he wanted to in practice. And, not everyone has the mindset of Michael Jordan. I understand that, but there's lessons that we can learn simply from sort of that intensity about how you practice, at least deliberately, on some of those things that you want.
Yeah. And just because, like I say, high level player, oftentimes I'm thinking high level talent, because there's a whole lot more people with high level talent than there are high level players. Just because you're talented doesn't mean you're good. And so like a Michael Jordan or a Kobe Bryant or some of these guys that are on the paragon of work hard and talent, that's why they're immortals. That's why they're Hall of Fame players. But it's a dime a dozen dudes that come along with lots of talent, but they fizzle out, or they don't have that work ethic, or they feel entitled. And it's not like Michael Jordan. I mean, us old guys, that grew up with Jordan, we think he's the god. It's not like Jordan was perfect. Jordan was a bad teammate at times. Jordan was not always the greatest leader, like if you're going to teach leadership, but he was a unicorn. He was able to get away with it because he was Mr. Universe when it came to talent, meshing talent and hard work. There's very few people like that. Most of us can't get away with some of the stuff he did. But the point of all that is, most of us, if we took our talent and we actually worked as hard, as maybe the lowest player on the team, we'd be pretty exceptional. And a lot of times we'll talk about outwork your talent, or, hey, you got to be a blue collar worker. And the players in the room with all the talent, it goes in one ear and out the other because they think you're talking to the last player on the team. Oh yeah, they've got to get on the floor for loose balls, or they've got to get the the rug burns, or the floor burns and that kind of stuff. No, that's what the Kobe Bryants did. That's what the Michael Jordans did. That's what the greatest of all time do, is that they take their talent, their high level talent, and put it with a walk-on work ethic, essentially. If you're always trying and acting like you're trying to make the team, you're going to be a pretty good player if you have a lot of talent. If every day at practice you're coming in and like, I've got a chip on my shoulder to prove I belong here, whether I'm going against JV players or I'm going against an all-state kid or whatever, you're going to be pretty good after a while. And, I love the quote, you've probably heard at the Navy SEALs, you don't rise to the occasion, you sink to the level of your training. What are your habits day in and day out? Because when you try to flip that light switch, if you don't have anything really to call upon, if you haven't built up those habits, that most of the time, but we see these high level talents all the time. They think that they're a light switch guy. They think that they can just flip the switch. Well, they flip the switch against the good teams, or they flip the switch when there's, for instance, I was coaching at a school years ago. I was coaching women, and on the men's side, they had this All-American, great player, great talent. Okay. And he was known for that year, his senior year, he hit like 6 or 7 game-winning shots, or shots that would take him into overtime. And almost every one of those teams that he hit those shots against were teams that they were supposed to beat anyways. But he didn't play very well for, 35 minutes of that game, or he took it off, or he just went through the motions. And then at the end, he flipped that switch. Well, he flipped the switch against teams he should have already he was already better than them, but he hit shots where if he'd played hard the whole time, it'd have been a 12 or 15 point game. He never would have had to flip that switch at the end. His habits were not something where you could count on him all the time. And that's where a lot of the talent people, they think, well, I don't need to work as hard because I have the talent. Well, work like a walk-on, and then all of a sudden you can be an amazing player.
Yeah, I love that mentality, that insight. It reminds me of something I heard Tom Brady say a little while back that I've shared pretty heavily on this podcast recently, but I think it's pertinent to this conversation. And he was asked a question about whether he thought about becoming the greatest of all time. And he said, no, never once did that enter my mind. My only goal every single day was to be the best at getting better. And like, holy cow. Wow, great. Like, he adopted that at Michigan when he was getting 1 or 2 reps. He said to himself, okay, these 1 or 2 reps are going to be the fucking best I got. And then you get 4 reps, then you get 6 reps, then you get 10 reps. And then, go on and you use that into your 20-year career and you become the greatest of all time. But that little piece of advice from him is something that every single one of us can adopt in all domains of our life. Be the best at getting better. That's totally under our control. That's about effort and nothing else. And I think that's really, really, really powerful. And, Tom Brady's pretty cool. So,
well, he's a great story too, because we look at him now and we're like, oh yeah, he's the GOAT, or he's the greatest of all time. He did all this, but people don't realize his freshman football team was 0-8 and he was the backup. He couldn't even play on an 0-8 freshman team. That's how bad someone thought his talent was. And then like, he wasn't, he was good enough to go to Michigan, but he wasn't good enough where they only recruited him at quarterback. They recruited like 4 other guys in his quarterbacking class so he comes in as a freshman. There's like 4 other quarterbacks. and then he doesn't get on the field, forever. And then even his senior year, the first, I believe, 6 games of the year, he alternated with Drew Henson, who was this hot shot freshman at the time. But Tom Brady's a senior, and he alternates with Drew Henson. One would play one quarter, one would play the second quarter, and then whoever played the best would get to play the second half. So it took him like halfway through his senior year to even to secure the job at the University of Michigan. And so we look back and we see the result. We're like, oh yeah, he's amazing, or he's this California kid. He must have had everything handed to him. And certainly there were some things maybe given to him at times, but the dude had to make choices throughout his whole career to change himself or to get out of a situation or to change a situation or to make changes. And he constantly was resilient. He constantly worked at it. Obviously had some talent, but this is a guy who it wasn't rainbows and butterflies his whole career.
Yeah, no, that's why the insight and his advice that he has actually makes sense, because sometimes it's challenging to take advice from people who are at the super top because they forget what they did when they were at the very bottom, and so he doesn't seem to forget that. And it's like, I don't know. I see it all the time on social media with like these really successful entrepreneurs always talking about like their 6-hour morning routine and how you can work 4 hours for 12 days and make 2 million. I'm like, dude, you didn't start that way. So that advice isn't really for the person who's like just quit their job or just is thinking about quitting their job or wants to start their own business. Like, you got to put in 12, 15-hour days. At some point there has to be a sprint. And then as you start to figure it out and your business starts to grow, then you can tailor off and delegate and things like that. But you got to think about when you were just starting. I mean, you have your own business, right? You talked about this at the top. Like, if I don't do it, nobody else does. And at some point, someone else will be able to do it, except for the actual thing, like you consulting or speaking or leading. All of those things are always going to be you, because that's the cornerstone. That's the nugget of your business. But other stuff can be automatized. But at the beginning, I got to get after it. I'm on a sprint here. I'm trying to make this baby work. And when you get to the super top, like sometimes you forget what it took to get there. So I think you have to think about the advice you're taking and maybe look at the people who are just a couple steps ahead, not who's like, Elon Musk, who has billions of dollars. You're not there yet.
Yeah. Or exactly like you said, is you take that advice from the Elon Musk or the people that are way, way, way beyond you. But those people that can remember back to when they were somewhat in your situation or can relate to that. But, there's plenty of guys like an amazing quarterback, that can't remember a time when they've really had to struggle, or their idea of struggling was, well, we lost in the championship game, or, well, we didn't win the championship that year. Something like that. That was their struggle. Or I didn't get paid as much as someone else, or, well, I had to come in as a freshman and I had to sit. Yeah, but most people don't sit as a senior, like Tom Brady. Oh yeah, our team was 0-8. Yeah, but were you the starter? Yeah. Okay, well, most people aren't 0-8 when they're the reserve. They were so bad that they couldn't even get on the field for a team that couldn't win a game. Yeah. Those kinds of things, it's like, oh, wow, that it kind of makes more sense now why Tom Brady is who he is. But then you and I easily can think of probably guys in our lives who were those guys that were on 0-8 teams and didn't react like Tom Brady. They're like, oh, coach is screwing me over. I don't know why coach isn't playing me. Forget this. And they end up being the not even the has been, they're the never was, because they're the ones that sit around saying, well, yeah, coach screwed me, and that's, playing their beer league softball or whatever, talking about, I don't know if, a long time ago, Napoleon Dynamite, the movie with Uncle Rico, and he's talking about if coach had put me in state, we'd won state if coach had put me in. We're that guy sitting around saying that. We know those kind of guys. Well, Tom Brady could have been that guy also, and Tom Brady chose not to.
Yeah. Those guys are hilarious, man. Like, you can't go through a 45-second conversation without mentioning how many yards they ran as a sophomore in high school. I'm like, dude, that's 25 years ago.
or how many yards they could have ran if coach had played them instead of somebody else. Oh, I was so faster, funny. And I was a basketball coach, so I got that all the time. Well, I'm better than this kid one-on-one. It's like, yeah, but it's a team sport. Like, I'm not looking for you to be the best one-on-one kid. I'm looking for you to set a stinking screen, but they're all, well, I could beat this kid one-on-one, or in 8th grade, I was better than this kid. Well, yeah, because you were taller than him or something, you know?
Yeah.
They just have no concept. All that kind of stuff. But I digress. But there's those people out there that take a situation and they choose to not make it better, or they choose, it's always someone else's fault. An external locus of control. Someone else or a situation's controlling me, and I have no say in this. It's like we're in a carnival ride, and we're strapped in. We can't do anything about it. That's not the case most of the time. Most of the time, we can do something. Now, we don't turn out to be the GOAT necessarily. We don't necessarily, well, if I make this decision today, I'm going to end up being Tom Brady. It's not always that, it's always not always that nice. But oftentimes, if we make good decisions, we're going to have better situations.
Yeah, I mean, exactly. I mean, it's better than feeling resentful and bitter about a situation and trying to make a better choice from it. I mean, that makes me think of your situation. I think a pivotal moment in your career where you got fired from your job and you called, the only Division I coach you knew, and he gave you some really sound advice, which like basically is what you're talking about right here. Either be bitter or be better. And I think that changed a lot for you in your career.
Yeah, I appreciate you bringing that up. It's like, giving me a paper cut and pour lemon juice on it or something. You bring up that. No. Yeah, I'm this young coach. I'm a head coach for the first time. And 4 years later, they allow me to take my talents elsewhere. They call me into the principal's office essentially and let me know that they're going a different direction. I get resigned. I get fired. They tell me I'm going to resign, but it's the same thing as a firing. And, I'm upset like almost anyone would be. And certainly I can think of 12 different reasons why they shouldn't have fired me. And it's their fault that we're not doing as well. For Pete's sakes, I was coach of the year. I was conference coach of the year 2 years previous. So it's not my fault, obviously. But I call up this coach thinking, well, he's going to give me some great advice about what to do contract wise, about my next job, who I should I sue somebody, what I should do, all this, what kind of buyout I should be asking. He's like, none of that. You have a choice right now, be bitter or be better. And your decision right this minute, not every action is going to change. Like you're not going to but your attitude is going to change right now based upon your decision. And so all your decision or all your actions from here on out will be based upon your decision right now. And most people, he said, get bitter. Most people lash out, just like you're saying, like I was just saying. That's most people's reaction. And so then that dictates all their actions after that. And so what they do is they never get better. They never address the things that they can control. Yes, there were 12 or so. I mean, there were so many ways that school screwed me over or could have done better or given me more resources or whatever. But there were just as many times that I screwed up as a coach, that I didn't interact with people the right way, or I was arrogant, or I was uncoachable or too stubborn. There were so many ways I could improve myself that had nothing to do with the school. And when you're bitter, you don't look at those things. You're blinded to those things you can do better. All you are is just your eyes are open to those things that someone else did to wrong you or why it's unfair. And 5 years, 10 years, 15 years from now, he told me, you're going to be a better or a worse coach based upon the decision you make right now. And it doesn't have to be a firing. It doesn't have to be coaching. It could be a breakup. It could be, not getting a promotion. It could be just somebody says the wrong word to you, or you feel offended by somebody. Okay, I felt offended by somebody. Is that going to dictate how I act the rest of my life? And in a lot of cases, it is. We can't get past that thing that happened to us. And so for me as a coach, that's one of those things that, always keeps popping up in my mind, bitter or better, bitter or better. And I'm not 100%. I don't always do it the right way, but I get reminded of that so often in all these little things that happen in my life. But I became a better coach and a better leader because of that. I didn't automatically become the perfect coach, but I don't think I would have been the coach that I ended up being if I hadn't been fired like that, or if I hadn't had that conversation.
Yeah, I mean, now you have it as sort of an internal compass to steer you in the right direction. Again, none of us are ever perfect. That's just not possible. But we can move in the right direction based on, what we've learned and what we've been taught and how we can progress moving forward based on some of those big ideas that stand out to us. And using that as a compass, be bitter, be better, basically gives you the agency to know that you have the control over your response. And everything can happen. I mean, and that's what athletes can learn in the midst of their performance. Yeah, the event has already happened. What are you going to do now and to respond to influence the outcome in a better way possible? Yeah, you just turned the ball over, but are you going to sprint down the other side of the court, or are you just going to walk? You know what
Well,
I
yeah.
mean?
And you as a baseball player, the baseball teams or the softball teams I've worked with a lot more softball teams, but the principles still remain the same. You'll see a kid strike out or a kid make an error, and it doesn't always lead to another error. It doesn't always lead to another strikeout, but sometimes it leads to them maybe not making the right play the next time. And you can see in their body language, sometimes they'll drop their shoulders or drop their head. Well, what we try to talk to them about is, at that very moment when you make that error or when you strike out, you were a batter or you were a hitter. But as soon as that's done, you're no longer a batter, and you're no longer fielding the ball for the next 90 seconds, the next 2 minutes. Your role is as a teammate. And oftentimes what we try to get these baseball and softball players, and anyone for that matter, but you're a teammate 99.9% of the time. That's your role, is as a teammate, not as a batter, not as a thrower, not as a fielder. But when you commit an error at shortstop and then you go quiet, or you don't say anything to your teammates, or you don't pump up your teammates, or even just reminding, I make an error. Hey, I can say now, hey, 2 outs, 2 outs. Someone might be like, well, yeah, of course there's 2 outs. There should be 3 outs, but there's 2 outs. That's beside the fact. Hey, 2 outs, play now at third, plays at third, or whatever you want to do. Or, hey, remember, we got to shift now, shift left, or whatever it is, where you can now snap out of that a little bit quicker and now move into the teammate mode of reminding your teammates of what we can do this next play. And you talk about that, you commit a turnover as a basketball player. Well, I got to get back on defense. Well, in some sports like baseball and softball, it's harder to move on because it's not the bang bang action. Basketball, sometimes you just don't have time to worry about that last play. Softball, baseball, golf. Golf is a sport where you have a lot of time between shots to beat yourself up over it. Well, but in baseball and softball, you're a teammate. Now it's not about that error. It's now about being a teammate. And some people can say, well, devil advocate can say, well, I've got to think about that last play so I don't make that same error, or I don't make that same mistake. There is some truth to that, except for the fact that how many times have you been a batting cage in your life and been successful? Thousands of times. How many times have you taken a ground ball? Thousands and thousands of times you've successfully taken a ground ball. I think it's probably more likely that was just a one-off than it was the rule. The rule is you field a ground ball successfully all the time. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
The rule is you hit the ball, or you don't strike out, or whatever. Trust your training. Going back to that Navy SEALs the quote, trust your training. And most of the time we beat ourselves up over a mistake we just had. And that doesn't help us be better the next time. And it certainly doesn't help the players around us. So we need to be better as players of transitioning to our role of teammate. And I don't think we do enough of that. We beat ourselves up, or we think about that last play, that last mistake, or we're embarrassed about it. But whatever it is, we need to move on in terms of our teammates need us to be a teammate now. They need to see us being encouraging or reminding each other of, hey, now the play's at a different base, or now this is what we're shifting because now the next hitter's coming up. Or if I strike out and I'm going back to the dugout, maybe I tell, that next batter, hey, watch that rise ball, or watch that sinker, or the spin is coming from this angle, or whatever. Maybe just give them something extra as opposed to retreating into our shell or our island. And that's what we tend to do as athletes sometimes.
Yeah, I mean, you touched on a really powerful thing in terms of baseball. Like, communication is so important. For one, right? It's letting your players know where they should go with the baseball. But after we make a mistake, what's running through our heads is negative thoughts. How many thoughts can you think of at one time? Only one. So instead of thinking, oh man, I suck at baseball, I'm never going to field this ground ball, you immediately shift, like you said, to communicating. Well, now I can't even think about that last play because I'm talking to my teammates. hey, turn 2, pitcher, back to you, give me the ground ball. Hey, we got 2 outs. That communication, yes, it's important, but it's also getting you out of your head so you can only think about the next play rather than the previous play. So there's some mental skills there involved, not only in communicating with your teammates and becoming a great teammate, but it's also gets you locked back into the present moment for the next play rather than dwelling. If you just sit there and don't say anything to anyone, all you're thinking about is that last play. Oh shit, fuck, don't hit the ball to me. This is crap, fuck. But now you're like, hey, buddy, here we go. Ground 2, here we go. Throw strikes, here we go. Hum, babe. Whatever it is, right? Just random baseball chatter. That gets you out of your head. Now you're being a great teammate. You're being vocal. You're being energetic. And you're ready for the next play, which doesn't guarantee you'll make it, but it gives you a way better chance than you would if you're like, fuck, 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 fuck. Right? So, I mean, that's a good,
Now, if it was if it was, I don't have a great phrase for this, but if it was a mental error, an intellectual error, well, maybe you can take 20 seconds to think about it, or a teammate reminds you, hey, you should have, if you missed the cutoff, or if you threw it to the wrong player or did what was not on the scouting report, a teammate now can remind you of that. That's something to think about. But most of the time when we strike out, it wasn't a mental error necessarily. It was just, hey, on that exact pitch, they got the better of me on this pitch, or on that error at shortstop. You know what? It was just a one-time thing because I fielded a ground ball thousands of times. I don't need to think about it. I need to know that I've done this. It's routine. I've done this habits all day long, so that I need to put it out of my mind, because the next time habits are going to kick in again. It was just a one-off. But how many times that you as a baseball player saw someone beat themselves up, and the next ball that's hit to them, it's still on their mind and they boot it again? Or you commit an error in the outfield, and maybe the next time you don't commit an error technically, but maybe instead of getting a jump on the ball and coming in, you hesitate because last time it went over your head. So you don't want to go, but it doesn't count as an error, but it's still the wrong play because you were thinking about the last play. Or you're scared to go too hard for the ball because you missed it last time or whatever. So it can affect you and get in the way of the habits that you've done. Trust your training. Thousands and thousands of times you've done this. Trust your training. Become a teammate. And that's what we do most of. We're not in the business of sports psychology necessarily. That's not what we handle most of. We handle the teamwork end of it. That's what we do more of. And so you as a player, if you make a mistake, yes, we want you to address that at some point. Yes, we're concerned about your mental health of that play, but we're concerned about the 8 other players on the field with you. And we're concerned about the team. And we think that your mental health will be a little bit better and your psyche will be a little bit better if you turn it off of yourself and all that negative talk, telling yourself how much you suck. If you can turn that into, hey, energy of reminding your teammates where this next play is going, or now we got 2 outs, but now runners at first and third, or whatever, turn that attention to something positive and productive that helps your team.
Absolutely. It's just part of your, recognize, release, and refocus method. Kudos to Brian Kane for the little acronym there. But yeah, so that's part of your routine, getting away from yourself. And then if you think about it just in a very specific mental health way, one of the best things you can do for your mental health is be of service to other people, is to go volunteer. So why wouldn't we basically use that same approach in the sports domain, which basically means, like exactly what you're saying, be a great teammate, be of service to someone else, let them know where they should go with the baseball, or hustle down the field, or tell them what pitch is coming, or tell them what you saw at the plate, or be engaged in the game. That's the same thing of volunteering or being of service to people as a regular person would try to take care of their mental health. But now you're taking care of it on the baseball field, because sports really boil down to, one thing, which is creating relationships, which is, really what you're an expert in, which is like leadership and culture building. But it all boils down to relationships you have with the coach and player, or with your teammates.
Well, there's a story of, and I'll probably get the year wrong, but I think it was back in the 1950s, so a long, long time ago. But there was this guy named Carl Menninger, and maybe you've heard of him. He was on like Time magazine. He was this noted like psychologist, but he went and spoke at this school. And afterwards, someone came up to him, and essentially the story goes, what would you say to a person who all this bad stuff had happened to them? They're kind of living at home, they've not gotten any of the breaks, all this kind of stuff. And almost expecting this doctor, this counselor or whatever to say, well, you need to go seek out counseling, or you need to get to this therapist or whatever. And the story goes that Carl Menninger said, I would tell them to put on clothes, leave their house, walk across the street, knock on someone's door who needs help, and try to help them. Essentially, I'm paraphrasing. And it kind of surprised that student because that was not what they expected, but it goes to what you were saying. Sometimes the best thing we can do to get out of our funk is to help someone else, is to serve someone else. Hey, if I'm in a slump as a baseball player, or if my shot's not going in as a basketball player, what can I do now to still be valuable and helpful to my teammates and get out of my funk? If I have a bad attitude, and I've tried this, I purposely tried to do this at times. If I'm feeling down, I'll write a note to somebody else, like a handwritten note. I even did this as a coach a couple times. I would have a player. So I'm mad at Aaron. Like I think Aaron's being a jerk or he's being a lazy player. What I'll do is I'll actually write you a handwritten note trying to remember something good that you've done in the last couple of days of practice or whatever and catch you being good. Now I'm in a funk. Like I'm not happy with what you've done or what you're doing, but I will try to encourage you and write a note purposely to get myself out of that funk. And not everybody can do that. And I don't do that great all the time, but I try as much as possible to snap myself out of it in terms of looking, how can I serve someone else, or how can I do something for someone else, or how can I turn my focus away from me onto someone else? And we see this all the time in sports. You know, someone's in a funk because they're not playing well. They don't care if we win. You know, they're in the locker room. The team won, but they only had 3 points, or they struck out 4 times and they're not having fun when everyone else is. You know, we know that that's an issue. How can we get those people to focus on their teammates and focus elsewhere? And it's a never ending battle, but that's something that if we can not necessarily master that, but if we can work toward being better at that, then all of a sudden our team, it catches on, it spreads, it's contagious. And now you have more people serving each other. And yeah, no one likes to strike out, but everyone's encouraging, uplifting the person that struck out. Hey, you'll get it next time, essentially. But the person that struck out is uplifting the other people by, hey, this is what I saw at the plate. Or, hey, you go get it. Sorry, I let you down, but you're going to get this now. You're going to bail me out. Appreciate it. You know, like in basketball, we would talk about, you know, if I shot and missed, you know, but someone bailed me out with a rebound, you know, hey, I got your back, Jamy. I got your back. It makes me feel a little bit better. But even if I miss a shot, I'm like, hey, fist bump, Aaron, thanks for bailing me out there. You know, that kind of stuff where you're just working off of one another. And it's not about you screwed up, I did well, or I screwed up, you did well. It's we, us, and ours. You know, we're all in this together. We're all working towards something together. And we lose that sometimes. But also, we also sometimes have coaches that maybe talk a good game about team, but they don't really day after day, every day back that up. You know, they don't reward team effort in the we, us, ours.
Yeah. Yeah. Speaking of that, what do you think we're getting wrong currently about leadership, or what are the most glaring mistakes you see happening?
Yeah. Very first thing, I think we make it about us as leaders. We're too ingrained, and this isn't a new thing. This has been happening since the dawn of time, pretty much. But we make it about us, and we see the leadership as being about how we can use power for us, for our benefit. Leadership is it benefits us. You know, I'm in a position of leadership, so I'm way up here, you're down here. We look at it as leader-follower dynamics way too much. Leadership is about making others better and making situations better. Or I would even say it's about making people better, making situations better. It's not necessarily about our power. We should be using our power for good as much as possible. So you see this in politics all the time. Unfortunately, you see this in business. Unfortunately, you see this in sports. The leaders, you know, do what I tell you to do. Do what I say, not what I do. I have different rules for you as opposed to me. I'm not trying to make situations better. I'm trying to see whose fault it is. I'm playing the blame game. You know, that's one of the best sports out there, is the blame game. You know, we play that all the time. And I think as leaders, related to it's not about us, is we're not very good with the responsibility issue. Most of us will say, yeah, I take responsibility for my actions. First of all, I would say a lot of us don't take responsibility fully for our actions. We just give it lip service. But what we don't do for sure is we don't take responsibility for other people's actions. And what I mean by that is we play the blame game as leaders. So Aaron commits an error at out in the field or whatever in baseball. Well, you're the reason we lost that game. Or it's not my fault Aaron made that error. I've put him through hitting drill, or I've put him through fielding drills. I've hit him the ball a bunch of times. Hey, he knows what he's supposed to do. That was his fault. That's not my fault. No, but it might not be your fault because you're not out there playing, but it is your responsibility to figure out how Aaron can be a better player, how he can be more prepared. Maybe you have him in the wrong position. Maybe you didn't give him the right scouting report. Or maybe you did all that right, but now it's your responsibility to help him to be better moving forward. We sometimes look at that blame game, the fault. It's not my fault. You're right. It's not as a leader, but it is 100% your responsibility to try to make things better, or to have made things better previously, to find solutions. I don't care whose fault it is if gas prices are high, going political. I don't care whose fault it is. I want solutions. How can we make this better? I don't care in this business whose fault it is that we're not getting the profits. How can we get profits, or how can we make it better? Now, obviously there's always room for correction, and there's always room for, hey, we've got to identify the problem. We've got to identify why this is the case. But too oftentimes we dwell on that and we cover our butts too much as leaders. And that could be political, business, or it could be coaching. We do this all the time in coaching. We cover our butts. It's not my fault. It's our players' fault, or it's the officials' fault, or whatever. And it's like, I saw it with a football coach this year, and he actually since got fired, but a high level football coach in the SEC conference, first game of the year, they lost. And he says, I take full responsibility for this loss. And almost in that same breath, then he started talking about, our guys just aren't tough enough. Our guys just aren't committed enough, all this kind of stuff, putting it on the guys. It's like, I understand where he's coming from, but if you're going to take full responsibility, we didn't get them ready. We're the reason that they're not tough enough. We're the reason that they're not committed enough. But you see this all the time. It doesn't matter what sport it is. They put the blame back on the players, which, yes, in some ways, there's blame to be had with the players, but ultimately as a leader, you're responsible for figuring out what makes Aaron tick, how I can make Aaron the best, how I can put him in a position to succeed and not fail. And we don't do that enough. We don't inspire. We don't add value to the people around us, but then we don't inspire them to be their best. So that was a long answer to that. But I think as leaders, we make it too much about ourselves. We either want the glory too much, or we want to cover our butts way too much.
No, I want all the longest answers you have, Jamy. But that's why I think everyone should coach youth, because you have to be so in alignment with your words and actions, or else those little people literally will not follow you at all. It's so interesting. I have this thing that I do with my 9-year-olds for our baseball team. So this is how we sort of keep score. This is not something I came up with. I took it from someone who's smarter than me. So just, preface it with that. But basically, a lot of times in coaching, you see someone get mad at something in the game, and then you ask them if they worked on it in practice, and they say no. And I'm like, well, it wasn't an emphasis. I don't understand why you're upset that they didn't do it in the game. So to think about it with my 9-year-olds, because they're still trying to get better and learn the fundamentals of baseball, whatever we learn in practice, let's say we're talking about first and thirds, or taking a good lead, or fielding the ground ball, that's what I'm ranking them on, or that's not ranking, sorry, that's what I'm scoring them on during the game. So every time they do it right, they get 10 points. I don't care about the actual score. I'm not really looking at anything else, because we didn't focus on that enough, because there's too much in baseball, and 9-year-olds have short attention spans. So this is what we're learning. And every time they do it right, they get a checkpoint, and they get to 300 points. We get a little pizza party. So I'm reinforcing the fact that this is what I'm teaching you, and this is what I want you to do in the game. Everything else, just go and play, have fun. And we'll keep learning on these little things as we go. And so I think coaches get worried. I've seen baseball coaches get mad at why their kids can't execute a first and third play. And then you talk to them after the game, yeah, we haven't worked on it in 6 weeks. So what do you what do you want them to do about it? How, like, how should they be able to execute that when you haven't gone it over, you haven't reinforced it, you haven't practiced it? And so coaches tend to lose that when they're just trying to, again, blame instead of take responsibility for not coming up with a good practice plan or not reinforcing the behavior they want to see or not acting in the way they want their players to embody. Some of things like that are very important. That's why I think everyone should coach young people, because you learn that very quickly.
Yeah, I don't know how many times, you say, well, how many times did I tell you that? Like I told you that a million times. Hey, we worked on this. Or it's not necessarily strategy, tactics, that kind of stuff. But how many times do we, especially at the higher level, but at the end of practice, maybe you're going to run sprints. Okay, so you're going to run sprints to get a little conditioning in at the end of practice or whatever. And you run sprints, and then at the end of those 5 or 6 sprints, your guys are doubled over, their hands are on their knees, and now you give them 5 announcements. Hey, remember to do this. Remember to do this. Hey, I need this paperwork in, all this stuff. And then the next day, half of them forget something. And you're like, I told you, why didn't you guys remember that? Well, you didn't set them up for success. You really set them up for failure. Why did you just tell them when, number one, half of them are ticked off at you because you made them run? They're all tired and they're not listening. First of all, they have 7-second attention spans to begin with, even with stuff they like even Instagram and TikTok. They love those things and they still scroll on those really fast. They don't dwell on those things either. So even the things that they love, they don't spend much time on. Why do you think that they would be paying attention to a boring coach telling them something now, especially when they're tired? So how are we setting our people up for success? And oftentimes we're just checking boxes. Well, I told you that. And I'm putting it on you as the athlete. Well, you should be mature enough. You should be responsible enough. You should want this bad enough. Especially the higher level you go. Well, you're a D1 athlete. Aaron, you're a D1 player. You should care about this. You're on a scholarship. No, that doesn't relieve me as a leader of my responsibility to make sure that I'm finding ways to set you up for success. Yes, Aaron should do X, Y, or Z, but Aaron's not always going to do X, Y, or Z. And so I'm not talking about enabling them, but I am talking about how can we set our people up for a little bit more success than we are. I'm not talking about doing stuff for them, but hey, if somebody's not good at listening, well, maybe write it out for them. Or if somebody's not good at writing it out, talk to them about it. Whatever it is, maybe, going back to that silly example of the announcements, maybe you actually post the announcements in your locker room. So you say it after practice when you huddle up, but it's also listed. It's also put on the bulletin board. Maybe you even send it out on an email chain or a text message that night. Maybe I know Aaron is really forgetful about something, or you know what? One of my assistant coaches noticed that Aaron wasn't paying attention much that day, or he was having a rough day. Maybe I text him or the assistant coach text him individually. Hey, Aaron, just a reminder, coach wanted that paperwork in tomorrow by 8:00. That's not enabling. Enabling is going to Aaron's house, filling out the paperwork himself, and that's probably enabling him. But what can you do to set your people up for success as opposed to just sitting back and playing the gotcha game? Oh, gotcha. You didn't do what you're supposed to do. Gotcha. I don't think that's good leadership, but a lot of us as coaches do that because, hey, I told you, and you should do something. You should, but they don't. We need to live in reality world and try to help prop them up as much as possible and help them along the way. And then maybe I get Aaron, where he's a lot more responsible after a year or two. And then there's a mini Aaron. There's a new Aaron that I take over. And maybe Aaron can actually help that new kid. But if we spend all of our time playing the blame game and, well, I told them it's up to them. They're an adult now. I don't know how many times I did that as a coach, especially early on. Hey, they're adults. They can handle this. They can do this. Yeah, but they still need help. We all need a little help once in a while.
Yeah, they can do it, but having that reinforcement or that leader at the top to show them is very powerful. So what do you think then are key traits or key attributes that good leaders do possess or can possibly learn to possess?
Yeah, one of them would probably be, and this will sound very obvious at first, lead by example. And you're like, yeah, okay, that's
not
obvious.
No.
Right. There's not a lot of things obvious, even though we use that word a lot. I use it all the time. I'm like, well, obviously. And I'm like, no, it's not obvious to a lot of people. But lead by example in terms of I'll give you probably the most clear one that I see sometimes in coaching, or one of the more clear ones, is that I want Aaron to be cool, calm, and collected, poised. I always talk about him being poised. Hey, you need to be poised out there when you're on the diamond. Yet when an umpire makes a mistake, am I poised as a coach? When I talked to Aaron about next play, you got to move on. Because I heard this guy, Jamy, on this podcast, this great podcast, talking about, moving on. You got to move on. But then when Aaron commits a mistake as a coach, do I move on if it really cost us the game? And a lot of times we don't lead by example. We don't do the things that we're saying. We don't lead ourselves by example. Our athletes, it doesn't matter what age, it could even be the professional level. But when they see us acting a certain way, that gives them permission to act that way, good or bad. So if we're acting the way we want them to act, it gives them then permission. It gives them an example to follow, but it gives them permission to act the right way. If we're acting a fool, if we're not poised, composed, that kind of stuff, it gives them permission to do that as well. Coaches always talk about the team. Almost all of us in any sport will talk about the team, but then our actions betray our words. Aaron hits that, home run to win the game for us. And in the dugout afterwards, or the club out afterwards, when we're addressing the team, we talk about Aaron's great hit. And I'm simplifying this, but we don't talk about the guy who made the sacrifice bunt, two batters earlier, that even put the person in, maybe you didn't hit the home run, but maybe you got the RBI, the game-winning RBI. And we don't talk about the guy who had the sacrifice bunt to move someone over, even in scoring position. Those are the little things that if we start talking about that to our team first, or we start talking about that to the media, our team starts to see that. And they're like, oh, well, Coach Bechler, when he talks about team, he really means it, because he just pointed that out. In basketball, we see that all the time. Kid hits a great shot to win the game. Well, if I talk about, well, hey, I knew Aaron was going to hit that shot. Aaron, great shot, but I knew you were going to hit it because you were wide open. And the reason you were wide open was because Jalen set an amazing screen for you. There was no question you were going to hit that shot because Jalen hit an amazing screen. And Chris, you made the pass just at the right time. But you know what, guys, that's awesome. I'm going to even go back. Juwan, you took that charge with 5 seconds left on defense. If you don't take that charge, we don't even get the ball back to even any of that to happen. When you start talking about those kinds of things, when you start pointing those things out, your players now start to see that your words are lining up with your actions. You are catching those little things. When you talk about the team, you're meaning it, because you're actually catching those things. Or, hey, guys, I knew we were going to get this win tonight because the practice squad. Where's my practice squad at? Where's my scout team at? Because you guys busted our butts for 3 days in practice getting us ready. When you start pointing those things out and catching people being good, now all of a sudden, people are like, oh, coach is real. Coach is genuine. So that's when I talk about lead by example, that's kind of what I mean. Because at first it's like obvious. Yeah, I need to do what's right. I need to lead by example. But I mean, what's important to you? What are you telling your players? What are you telling your people around you? And then are you backing that up? Are you reinforcing that action? Because that's what culture is. Culture is not necessarily what we say. Culture is what we're reinforcing and we're rewarding, what we're permitting, what we're allowing. But reinforce and reward those things that are important to you. And a lot of times we don't do that. We don't lead by example, like with the composure and the poise type thing, but we don't also lead by example when something good happens. We point out the little things that went into that. We just act like the dumbest person in the stadium. Even the stupidest parent could see that someone just went for 30 points, or someone had 3 touchdowns. But can a dumb person in the stands see that the offensive line created those holes? Or that in football, the wide receiver, he came off that line so hard, the safety kind of moved over and thought it was going to be a pass play when really it was a run play. And that allowed that running back to get in the second or third level of the defense because that wide receiver sold it that it was a pass play. Those little things, I know I'm getting in the weeds here. I'm getting excited about this, but if you as a coach, you start pointing those little things out, your players will start doing more little things.
Yeah, I mean, it's this idea of like praising the effort over the outcomes. If all you ever do is praise the outcomes, like good job, you got a hit, we won, yada yada yada, then what's what's the effort all for? If I'm always praising the hustle, diving after loose balls, sprinting out of the box after you hit a ground ball, like all of these little minute things that coaches preach all the time, but don't reinforce with their words, then players are going to stop doing it because, repeated behavior is rewarded, or rewarded behavior is repeated. And so if we want that behavior to be repeated over a long season, then we have to praise it consistently. If I want the guy who's in the 9-hole who, basically bunts every single game, if I want that guy to continue doing his job and executing that, I have to praise him all of the time for working on his bunting in practice, for thinking about where he can drop the ball at the perfect angle so my guy guarantees get to second or third, not just be like, good job, you hit the winning run, all right, next game. Like exactly what you're saying. And that behavior is not going to be reinforced. That guy eventually is going to stop caring about bunting, and you're going to wonder why he sucks at bunting now. He doesn't suck at bunting. He's still great at it. But he has no reason to do it because you've given him no like praise for being that guy on his team. And so I think that's such a valuable point about really leading by example and what that actually means.
Yeah, and especially if the stuff that you're talking about or praising doesn't show up in a box score, or is it because sometimes you can not get penalized if you sacrifice. If maybe you don't have that counted against you, let's say. But in basketball, let's say there's a situation where you block someone out really well. Well, you don't get credit for that rebound. Maybe someone else got that rebound, but you blocked somebody out that allowed your team to go get that rebound. That doesn't show up in a stat sheet anywhere. No one's going to really see that. So if you can point that stuff out, but sometimes you're going to have situations where people get rewarded. They're going to get rewarded with some kind of a stat or some kind of an award. That's fine. You can still praise them, but you really have to be on the lookout for those people who, like in basketball, for instance, there might be a player that passes the ball in the right way to a person who then passes the ball to the scorer. Well, you don't get an assist for that. It's not like hockey where you get an assist for passing it to the passer who passes it to the person who scores. So maybe you're the guy that passes the ball and you have to cut down the lane. Well, the defense thinks that you're going to get a give and go or something, and they move over to you. That's not anything that'll be in a stat sheet because you didn't even get the assist. Those are the things you really, as a coach, have to be even more observant about. Is even the smaller things. In the third inning, you hit the cutoff man just right. That may not show up anywhere. It wasn't even a bang bang play. That was important, but you hit the cutoff, or you did this in the third inning. And so when you did it in the seventh inning, it was no surprise to me because that's just what you were looking for, and you did it right then. So when you really mattered, going back to the Navy SEALs things, you don't rise to the occasion, you sink to the level of training. When your habits are dictating you do something in the third inning, whether it's game time or not, well, in the seventh inning or the ninth inning, when it really matters, you did it because you have those habits. Well, like you said, that kid's going to stop doing it right if you don't reward them for it, or at least recognize it. And it doesn't mean you have to do jumping jacks and stop the game because a kid hit a cutoff in the third inning. But man, you can fist bump them when he comes into the dugout, so everyone else sees, hey, great job, Johnny. Hey, Johnny, that was awesome that you hit the cutoff. Well, coach, that's what I'm supposed to do. I know. Great job. I love it when you do what you're supposed to do. And then other people start to see that. So yeah, exactly what you're saying, but really look for reasons to catch your guys being good, especially when it's just kind of a secretive type thing or something that no one's going to really notice.
Yeah. It's huge. Like coaches just have to be actually paying attention. They have to actually be paying attention and be in the present moment like they want their players to be. And then we can find those golden nuggets that keep players going, especially when things are hard. So that's really powerful. And there's another cool quote that comes with habits. It's that you don't decide your future, but your habits will. And I think that's very pertinent to what you're talking about, because that's what we fall onto. We fall into our things that we do consistently. And like Kobe Bryant said, we want to be brilliant at the basics. And if we are, then our fundamentals are strong and we just can move forward, with that rock solid foundation. So that's really powerful. But thank you, Jamy, man. I appreciate the conversation.
Absolutely. I appreciate you having me.
Yeah, dude, anytime. It was nice to meet you virtually, and thanks for the work that you're doing and everything you put out into the world. If you enjoyed that episode, please click here for another full-length episode of the podcast. And please don't forget to subscribe. But above all else, most importantly, please take good care of yourselves and others. And I'll see you next time. Lots of love. Cheers.